Morning, everyone. So I'm just going to give it another minute to let everyone join, and then we'll kick off. Okay, I think we'll just get started. So good morning and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today on our session on approaches to life cycle assessment in the bioeconomy. My name is Lindsay Dunbar, and I'm one of the Senior Business Engagement Managers at the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Centre, and I'll be your chair for today's session. So I just want to give you a quick run through of the agenda for today. First, I'm going to start off with a little bit of housekeeping. Then I'm going to do an introduction to the Bioeconomy Cluster Builder project. Then I'm going to introduce our guest speaker presentations. Then we're going to finish up with some Q&A, and then we'll draw the session to a close. So just a bit of quick housekeeping for everyone. Just to make you all aware, today is a webinar session, so all the participants are muted. If you've got any questions at all, then please do submit them through our Q&A box, and then we'll ask the speakers at the end. And then as well, if you've got any technical issues at all, so any issues with your sound or your visuals, then please do get in contact via the chat box and we'll get that sorted for you. Just to make everyone aware that the webinar today is being recorded, and you'll be sent a link to the recording afterwards, along with any other relevant material. So I just want to give you a really quick introduction to the Bioeconomy Cluster Builder project. We're a 3-year ERDF funded project, and it's a collaborative project between ourselves at the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Centre, Innovate UK KTN, and Scottish Enterprise. And the purpose of the project is to raise awareness of the benefits and applications of industrial biotechnology and also the wider bioeconomy. And we're here to connect people and resources to develop new and existing value chains. And we also like to encourage the utilisation of Scotland's bioresources instead of relying on the more traditional fossil fuel-based manufacturing. So we run targeted workshops such as today. We run runs that are a bit more kind of technical, such as today's LCA session, and we've also done a recent one on an investor pitch session. And we also do ones that are a wee bit more sector specific. So we've got some upcoming events on seaweed and construction and on textiles as well. So if you're interested in any of those upcoming events, then please do visit the link I've put at the bottom of this slide here, and you'll get a bit more information. We also provide innovation support to companies who interact with us. And we also signpost SMEs to different funding opportunities. So we're going to move on today to today's guest presentations. And we're going to start off with the Data Lab. And firstly, we've got Karen O'Hanlon, who's a business development executive, who's going to talk a little bit about her experience in this area. And she's joined by her colleague, Lauren Spark, who's a Torch business development executive as well. And she's going to be talking about her work in Torch. Then we're going to move on to Lucy Montgomery. Lucy is a senior consultant with NNFCC, the Bioeconomy Consultants, and she's going to give her perspective from a consultancy point of view. Then we're going to move on to Fergus Moore, who's a co-founder of Revive Eco, and they've just recently gone through the LCA process, and he's going to talk about his perspective from an SME. And then finally, we've got Antonia Donchilla, who's a group sustainability specialist at Croda International, and she's going to give her perspective from a large multinational company. So I'm going to move on and pass over to Karen. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll get Karen's slides up.
Thank you. Can I have my first slide, please? Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here, and it's great that so many people have managed to join us on what is such a sort of horrible winter's day today. So I'm Karen O'Hanlon. I'm one of the business development executives with the Data Lab Innovation Centre. I'm responsible for Inverness Hub up here in the Highlands of Scotland. I'm joined today by my colleague, Lauren Spark. And Lauren's responsible for our Torch service, which you'll speak about a little bit. So what I want to do this morning is just talk a little bit about the Data Lab Innovation Centre and really kind of our role in terms of how we might be able to assist you in life cycle assessment and just in any sort of data challenges you have more generally. So as I said, we're one of the innovation centres in Scotland, similar to iBio in many ways, but where we differ is also that we're not sector focused. So we work across all the sectors. And really our role is to help support collaborative innovation and projects that are data and AI focused. We also work in terms of building Scotland's workforce to have those industry-ready skills we need. It's not just about having world-class data sciences and data professionals, but it's ensuring that the whole of Scotland's workforce is data competent and feels confident around using data and really understands the value and the benefits of data and artificial intelligence. And thirdly, the other thing that's really important for us is that we build and we support that vibrant data science community in Scotland through events such as Data Fest, but also smaller events we run, and crucially our new online community. And I'd really urge you to join the sort of 1,000 people across Scotland who've already signed up to our new community. Next slide, please. So I guess for me, I'm not going to talk a lot about life cycle assessment, but what I do want to talk about is about data, because really data is really important here. You know, it doesn't matter if it's life cycle assessment you're doing, whether you're doing carbon tracking that I have a bit more experience in, but you need that data. So you need to be able to get the data out of your systems, whether that's Excel spreadsheets, whether that's your invoices, your information from your suppliers, your utility companies, etc. Next slide. And that's really important because the information you need in order to do things like life cycle assessment comes from that data. That generates your information, which is crucially important because that then feeds in to the models. Next slide, please. So, you know, this data is providing you with the information, which is running the models you need, support life cycle assessment, carbon tracking, all these other things that are crucial. You need to be able to access your data and to be able to get it out of your systems. Next slide. And this is really where the Data Lab can help you. Just have the next two slides, please. Thanks. So the Data Lab can help with support for small data projects. So that could be these small innovation projects where you're looking to experiment and find out what your data could do, what value it could bring to your organisation. We can also help with the practical skills and the knowledge to understand and to do more with your data. And that can be through some of our student schemes, through our placement schemes, or just upskilling and reskilling your workforce. And finally, and what Lauren's going to talk about briefly, is our Torch Business Advisory Service. And next slide. So if you just bring up the three things here, thanks. So the Data Lab has a lot of services, and by no means can I go into those this morning, but you'll see here that the Torch service that Lauren's going to talk about is in that first pillar. That's part of our Support to Innovate. So we've got these Support to Innovate projects around supporting you to innovate. And I'll now hand over to Lauren, who's going to talk a little bit more detail about maybe how Torch could help you free up that data, that information you might need for life cycle assessment. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you very much, Karen. Next slide, please. So just a very brief introduction to our Torch service, which was launched about 2 years ago now. Our view and goal is to help organisations who understand the importance of the data. So like Karen mentioned, whether that's reporting on operational performance, employee performance, or whether you're actually looking at something that's specific like life cycle assessment, life cycle reporting, or environmental reporting across the organisation. One of the key things is to understand where that data is held in your organisation. First of all, is it held somewhere? Do you trust it? Can you access it? And how do you get back out so you can then report across the KPIs that you need to meet and address? Next slide, please. So what we actually help to do in the simplest form is align people, process, data and technology. We understand if it's a space that you don't live in, the technological marketplace is deliberately confusing and can be very difficult to understand what systems and what services are out there that will get you to the point that you need to be. And that's what we like to help. So we advise as a critical friend. We provide an options paper outlining the best roadmap forward from a data, technology, process and people perspective, and give you recommendations and outlined and clear next steps on how best to tackle that. And that's really what the Data Lab look to do across all. We can help signpost and get you on that next stage of your data journey, finding the clearest path forward and making sure that it's as simple and as easy to understand, and you've got that trust and confidence in the decisions that you're making with your data and how that can port into things like life cycle assessment, but also reporting across your general business day-to-day operations and potentially more for future. Next slide, please. So we look to accelerate, minimise, give proven neutral advice and access into the Scottish ecosystem. Your journey from innovation to value, understanding the risks in your organisation, the advice that the Data Lab can provide is consistent, it's completely neutral in a marketplace. We have access to over 60 suppliers, from the big cloud providers down to individual sole contractors with very niche skills in the data space, and we can signpost to learning and education, potential funding models, and also integration with academics to help what Torch can do by setting out that data strategy and longer term vision. Next slide, please. So just a very brief overview of some of the organisations and industries we've supported. As Karen mentioned, the Data Lab is across all industries. So we've delivered 31 projects so far, 21 industries, and into our supply chain there's been 82 introductions to help about 80% Scottish organisations achieve what they were looking to do. Next slide, please. And just to wrap it up, this is really just a couple of little quotes from our suppliers, organisations that we've worked with. I'll give you a minute to kind of skim over that rather than just reading to you, but it gives you a view of the areas that you can support, how quickly you can get things off the ground if you understand and have confidence in your data and have the right systems and processes and techniques in place to achieve and deliver the projects that you set out to do so. Next slide, please. Again, just a couple of examples from organisations who have gone through that struggle, not understanding the marketplace, not sure how to take those next steps, and how Torch and the wider Data Lab service can actually help them on that journey. Next slide, please. And just if there's any way you want to get in touch, if there's any questions for today, we're always open. You can obviously go to our website, which is a fountain of information. As Karen mentioned, we have over 1,000 members on our Data Lab community now. So if you do want to tap into that, feel free, or you can email the Torch team directly if it's anything specific around assistance on data strategy, how to navigate through that complex technical marketplace and understand what systems and processes are out there, or if you're at that point you really have to bring in the skills to help you achieve what you want to do in the data space, we could advise on that too. Thank you very much for your time.
That's great. Thank you very much both to Karen and Lauren for the really insightful presentation into the Data Lab and data in the wider sense. So we're now going to move on to Lucy Montgomery from NNFCC. So I'd like to invite Lucy to share her slides.
Hiya. So I'm Lucy Montgomery. I'm from NNFCC, where I'm a senior consultant, and I'm just going to talk very briefly about my experience, or our experiences, of conducting LCA in the bioeconomy. I should probably start by explaining what a bioeconomy consultant is. It's not obvious to explain, but very basically, we answer questions in the bioeconomy, and the questions come from a range of areas across the bioeconomy. So we get a lot of questions about feedstocks, so how much is available, and this could be a sort of very general question about bioresource in total. It could be a very specific question about a given material. So for example, a recent question we had was about the availability of food grade protein that was sort of going spare from different sources. We get questions about the things that you can make from these bioresources. So whether that's products like bulk chemicals, polymers, or starter molecules to make other materials, or sort of fine chemicals, ingredients for food and cosmetics, materials, construction materials, or packaging materials, a whole range of questions around bio-based products. Biofuels and bioenergy, which I hope are relatively self-explanatory. And biorefining, where we sort of bring all these questions together. And NNFCC is really a specialist business consultancy, so we don't advise on other things. We're a really small team, and all of us are big nerds about the bioeconomy. Most of us have a green chemistry or a biotech background. My own background is in bioprocess engineering. So basically we say that our aim is to de-risk the bioeconomy for our clients. So our clients, they want to do something like invest or change a policy or develop a new technology in the bioeconomy, and we're just trying to provide them with some evidence so that they can help make that decision and take some of the risk out of it for them. We have, I'd say, 3 types of client: a sort of commercial client, a government client, and then researchers. So here's a kind of a snapshot of the big companies we work with. And I'll go into a bit more detail of the LCA specific work we do rather than talking through everything we do. We also get questions from government to sort of help shape bioeconomy policy. So just again, providing evidence. We don't make the policy, but we provide evidence to people who make the policy. And then as part of research projects, particularly publicly funded ones, Horizon Europe, Horizon 2020, we provide bioeconomy policy or bioeconomy market knowledge of sustainability, and we help companies with developing their exploitation strategies and business plans as part of commercialization of an innovation in these research projects. And again, this is a snapshot of some of the projects we're working on at the moment. So looking at NNFCC's work on LCA, I think we can, I've divided it into these 4 areas. So a lot of the work, I'd say the bulk of the work we get on LCA is questions for established or emerging bioprocesses, particularly renewable biofuels, so renewable transport fuels or bioenergy, renewable energy. We do a lot of work in anaerobic digestion and compliance with the subsidy schemes that exist. So we've developed a carbon calculator tool for that. And for this kind of work that we do, because it's regulatory compliance, all of our work has to be third-party audited. And as part of this, we're members of the ISCC and the RSB voluntary sustainability schemes. So we're essentially meeting those standards. And I've got a little sort of picture at the bottom of an example of our biogas carbon calculator. For policy maker clients, so in this case for the Department of Transport, we help them develop new methods around LCA, so in particularly greenhouse gas accounting. We had a question recently about recycled carbon fuels. So this isn't actually a biofuel, this is where the carbon comes from a non-biological source, and we sort of helped shape some of the methodologies for that. We also get questions from clients who were in the process of developing something. So particularly aviation fuel, we've had a lot of questions lately about, it's aviation fuel and hydrogen, about processes that are still in the pipeline, but looking at what they need to change to be able to hit those greenhouse gas limits that they have to meet the regulatory requirements. And finally, what I'm going to talk about today is sort of part of developing new products. So this is as part of research projects. So in particular, bio-based chemicals or bio-based food and feed ingredients. We look at LCA and sort of where the product has the biggest impact, or where it might have the biggest impact when it finally makes it to industrial scale production. The tools we use to do this are sort of our in-house expertise, I guess. So we have a good understanding of the Renewable Energy Directive and its recent update. And so this is for all the compliance stuff for biofuels, bioenergy. And obviously we have to understand the UK greenhouse gas rules that go with that. So whether that's from Department for Transport for things like biomethane as a transport fuel or ethanol as a transport fuel, or BASE and Ofgem for example, biomethane as heat. We also have to understand the data that these rules are derived from. So for energy and fuels, this is Biograce and the updated Biograce 2. And the EU Joint Research Council also publishes a lot of details of how they've come to their numbers, their greenhouse gas limits that these companies making biofuels have to achieve. For the more sort of exploratory LCAs, we use LCA software, SimmerPro, and we use the databases, EcoInvent, Plastics Europe, depending on what the question is. And I should add that a lot of clients like us to provide our LCA in an Excel file so that they can play with it themselves later after the work's been completed. And sort of the things we learn from these LCAs are quite interesting. So we identify points of weaknesses in the process, so things that the companies need to work on in order to reach a certain sustainability goal. We look at areas where they can maybe make a product that's better than the competition. So for example, by changing their source of electricity, they might be able to make a product that outperforms the competitor's product. And sometimes we do look at these different scenarios, which is quite interesting. So you can see the impact of what happens if they change feedstocks or any other sort of resources that they use. And lately, there've been a lot of questions around carbon capture. So even though if it's a biological process, it generates some carbon dioxide, what happens if they capture that carbon? Will that give them an edge over their competitors? So very briefly, I've decided to give a little case study that I worked on, I think it was last year. And this is a fermentation process. So I tried to keep it iBioIC relevant. And the process was being developed at pilot scale. We looked at greenhouse gas emissions, we looked at water footprint, and we looked at land use. The fermentation process was making a single cell protein as either a human food or animal feed. But the special thing about this process was that it used carbon dioxide or a C1 based feedstock. So I've got a little diagram of the process here. So there was a CO2 derived feedstock, which I'm not going to name, going into the fermentation process along with the nitrogen source and other nutrients, tap water. Because it was an aerobic fermentation process, there was compressed air going in, CO2 coming out, obviously steam for cleaning and for heating, electricity. And then we kept the process really simple. We looked just at the centrifuged sort of raw biomass, the single cell protein, and we didn't look at any of the downstream processing. And it was quite interesting. The main factors in terms of where the greenhouse gas emissions were coming from were the steam that was being used. So that's this one here. And the electricity that was needed both for sort of mixing and operating the centrifuge, but also for aeration. This was a huge source of electricity. So obviously that presented for the company an area where they could really improve. So by using a source of renewable heat to generate the steam, they could really bring down their footprint. And also by using 100% renewable electricity, they could really improve. There was another really big debate around the C1 feedstock and the CO2 that's released during the process. So I mentioned that the C1 feedstock they were using used captured carbon dioxide. And so I think when they started the project, they thought maybe the product could be carbon negative because it involved carbon capture. But what we worked out is that the carbon dioxide that they were using in this particular case was derived from Iceland, where it's coming from geothermal energy. So when they extract the heat from the ground, a certain amount of CO2 is released from the ground as well. So technically, this is geological CO2, so fossil CO2. And when the microbes respire that CO2, that's still counted as essentially fossil CO2. So you can kind of see in this orange bar here, this was adding a huge carbon footprint to their process. So that was quite interesting. If they used, for example, CO2 from a brewery or from another biological process, this wouldn't count at all to their carbon emissions. So that was quite interesting. They also wanted to compare it to mycoproteins, so corn and soya beans as two other very common sources of human food protein. And we found that it was quite comparable, sort of the same ballpark compared with, say, beef or other proteins. The greenhouse gas emissions associated with mycoprotein production will always be a little bit higher because they have a biological feedstock, so a crop, and there's all the emissions that have gone into making that crop. So here, that's the gray, that's the carbon source. So this is the wheat that they use to make the glucose that they use to make the corn. For soya beans, it was quite interesting. The greenhouse gas emissions came essentially all from the land use change. So this is parts of the world where they're carrying out deforestation in order to plant soybeans. But again, we had some sort of interesting points. It really depends where the soybeans come from. If it's soybeans for human food, they come from Europe and Canada generally, and there is less land use change and the emissions for soybeans are really low. If it's soybeans for feed, they come from all over the world, and there's a lot of problems with land use change and the carbon emissions are really high. So again, it really depended on what they wanted to use their single cell protein for in the end. Yeah, I just wanted to give a really quick snapshot of an industrial biotechnology process where we've done an LCA. The study itself was a snapshot, so I've given you a snapshot of a snapshot. We used a lot of assumptions because we didn't have a lot of data. We didn't look at downstream processing and formulation. Obviously, if you're turning the product into a burger or a chicken nugget, that has a huge impact. And so, for example, for corn, I think about half of their carbon footprint comes from making the chicken nugget, and half of it comes from actually making the mycoprotein. I've not shown the water and land footprints here because of time, but a biological process where they weren't using any biological carbon source had a really low land and water footprint. And in terms of their sort of greenhouse gas emissions overall, the steam, electricity, and the carbon source all played a really big role. And that's me.
That was great. Thank you very much, Lucy. I really enjoyed your presentation. I really liked your example, your case study. I thought that was great to see it, an actual real life example given there. So thank you very much for that. Next up, we've got Fergus Moore, and Fergus is from Revive Eco. So Fergus, if I can invite you to share your slides, please.
Yep, absolutely. 2 seconds. Can everyone see that okay? I'm going to assume that we all can.
Yep, that's perfect.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Okie doke. Hi there, everyone. So my name is Fergus Moore, and I am one of the co-founders of a company called Revive. So I'm going to talk through a wee bit about the kind of background to Revive and what we mean by closing the loop on coffee waste. I'll then go into a wee bit about kind of why life cycle analysis is important to us as a company, and then go into a wee bit about our kind of our experiences and some of the challenges that we've seen as a young startup with life cycle analysis. But to kick off, speaking a bit about the kind of background to Revive, and I'll kick off with the problem that we're looking to tackle, and that is palm oil. So over more than 70 million tonnes of palm oil are produced worldwide every year. It's mostly in places like Malaysia and Indonesia. It's used in a wide variety of different products and industries, from cosmetics to pharmaceuticals, food and drink, cleaning products. The chances are, unless you're very, very particular about what you buy, there will be products in your house that contain palm oil right now. However, it's also hugely destructive to our planet, unfortunately. Palm oil production is one of the key drivers behind deforestation and the kind of the carbon emissions associated with that globally. So we think that it's time that we need an alternative to this that's more sustainable, it's locally sourced, but most importantly can do the exact same thing as palm oil. And we think at Revive that the answer may just lie in your daily cup of coffee. So why coffee? Well, we drink a whole lot of coffee. In the UK, it's more than 95 million cups of the stuff every single day. This in turn leads to the production of more than 500,000 tonnes of used coffee grounds across the UK annually. Most of this is going to waste, the vast majority ending up in either landfill or being incinerated, which is extremely costly to the UK coffee industry. Costs more than 80 million in waste costs every year. So we think that these two issues, I suppose, that issue of palm oil and the issue of coffee waste marry up quite nicely. And that's why we created Revive to essentially create a kind of solution to each. So coffee shops, restaurants, hotels, airports, you name it, produce coffee grounds all across the country. We work with third-party logistics companies to collect these used coffee grounds from across Scotland and are taken back to our facility at BioCity, just outside Glasgow, where we've developed a patent pending process to extract high-value natural chemicals from the coffee grounds that can be used to replace palm oil and its derivatives in numerous products and industries. We're then left with a solid residual material, which I guess some other companies might look at as, I guess, a waste material, but we, as we kind of work to circular principles, look at this as still a material with some value. So it's used as a kind of bulking agent for things like fertilizers and soil conditioners. And we're actually working with a Scottish skincare brand at the moment to use the grounds, the residual grounds, as an exfoliator in a coffee scrub at the moment, which is really exciting for us and means that the process is completely zero waste. So to take you right back to the beginning with Revive, so we founded Revive in 2015. It was founded by myself and my business partner, Scott Kennedy. We were both graduates from Strathclyde Business School, and both, I would say, equally driven to kind of build a company that had impact at its core, sort of positive, either social or environmental impact at its core. At the time, as a lot of young students we were both working in hospitality, so we were seeing kind of firsthand the amount of food waste that was going in the bin at every single shift. So decided to set up Revive to kind of do something about that. Obviously, Scott and I aren't the technical team here. We don't have that kind of scientific background. So over the last couple of years, we've raised over 800k in grant funding and private investment to facilitate the development of our now patent pending extraction and purification process. And we're now at a kind of large lab scale from as I said, our lab in BioCity, starting to produce these chemicals and sort of sending samples out to a range of different companies at the moment, including the likes of Lush, Ferrero Rocher, Unilever. We've also created a potential coffee dye that we've had interest from companies like Patagonia and Finisterre. So it's a really exciting moment for us. We're just starting to get into the kind of selling, kind of commercialization side of things, which is why kind of LCA is becoming increasingly important to us. And to get into a bit about sort of, I guess, more into why LCA is important to us, we see it as there being kind of three key, I guess, pillars behind why life cycle analysis is so important to us. So it's important for ourselves, I guess, personally. It's important for our customers, and it's also important. Well, I've put for our followers, which feels a wee bit biblical. So I'll say our social media following, or kind of consumers as a whole rather than followers. But so for ourselves, Scott and I set up the company with impact at its core, and it's really important for us that we are not just saying we're doing good. We can actually back it up with the kind of facts and figures. I guess from a kind of moral perspective, if we want to be able to back things up and actually show that we are actually having the positive impact on the world that we want to. We also see that it can help us with making actual business decisions. We understand that there will be moments where we have to make decisions that will have a negative impact on our carbon footprint. We kind of understand that that's just the way of the world. Not everything can be perfect, but as long as we can show that the carbon footprint of the company as a whole is positive, and having all that kind of data there when we're making decisions, I think is really important for us. Secondly, for our customers, when speaking with skincare brands, cosmetics brands, being able to showcase the kind of positive impact that our ingredients and sort of switching over to our ingredients from, say, palm oil could have is a really powerful selling tool for us. We're actually also seeing increasingly the companies that we're speaking to, I'll admit it's more so the kind of larger companies like Lush, Ferrero, Nestle, all these kind of companies that we've spoken with are increasingly asking for LCA information. And I think that trend is only going to continue to grow, and it will just become the norm that, even for SME cosmetics manufacturers, if they're going to start changing their suppliers, they're going to want to know that we can actually back up our claims with life cycle analysis to show the kind of the carbon footprint of our products. So again, that's a really important one for us. And then finally, for our kind of social media following, one of our kind of the key pillars behind Revive as a brand, I suppose, is education, and we're really driven to use Revive as that kind of educational piece to show consumers the importance of their carbon footprint, and I guess how changing their buying habits can improve or I guess make their carbon footprint worse. So being able to kind of show this kind of information, I guess specific to Revive, but also understanding and being able to show it for other products as well, I think is really important for us, and being able to show it in an easily digestible fashion is absolutely essential in this. I think sometimes it's easy to kind of get bogged down in just the numbers, and I think it's easy to forget that sort of Joe Blogs in the street doesn't necessarily understand what 10 tons of carbon means. Is that good? Is that bad? I think it's being able to sort of compare and contrast that with like I said, easily digestible things is really important. One thing that we've done from the very beginning was we would often post on our social media about how much coffee we had collected and recycled, and rather than just putting we have now recycled 100 tons of coffee, which I don't know about you, but I can't picture what 100 tons of coffee looks like. Is that the size of a van? Is it the size of my living room? Is it the size of Hampden Stadium? It's very difficult to kind of picture that, but we would put it into perspective with examples like I've just given. And one that we would use quite often would be an equivalent number of lattes. So, we've recycled X number of tons, and that's the equivalent of X number of 1,000 lattes. And everybody knows the size of a latte, so they can kind of picture it a wee bit more easily in their mind. So whilst life cycle analysis is really important to us, we've also, I'd say we've had a lot of kind of challenges with it, and with kind of trying to implement it into the business. As a kind of young, early stage company, we don't really have the kind of concrete data and processes in place, which can make it quite difficult to kind of calculate. Oh, sorry, my screen's just turned off. There we go. Quite difficult to calculate. The process itself is, as in the kind of our technology is constantly changing. Our team of chemists are constantly innovating and optimizing the process, which can have a real kind of drastic impact on that LCA data. For example, it was just a fortnight ago on the Monday, our chemists came up with an idea of how we could decolorize our coffee oil without needing to use a material that we were currently using. And by the Friday, they'd developed that process, and we're happy that it was kind of scalable. How do we account for changes in the process that can take literally 5 days and just come off the top of somebody's head. And it's really difficult at this stage until the process is absolutely concrete. And those unknowns just make it really difficult. And I guess on top of what we don't know, or one of the key things we don't know, sorry, is we know how the process looks right now, and we have an idea of what it'll look like once we scale up to the sort of 1,000, 10,000 litre scale. But as is often the way, things will crop up, the issues will crop up, wee changes and innovations and adaptations will probably have to come up as we scale up. So it's not as simple as saying, well, the footprint at our current scale is this. If we scale up by 100 times, the footprint will be 100 times the size. It's really difficult to kind of calculate that. And within that, there's also the things that we don't know that we don't know. I guess we can, add things to the LCA and just put estimations in there. But if we don't even know that we don't know them, that becomes even more complicated. And the final piece is just how kind of costly we've found it. What we really need is a really well designed, adaptable model or platform that we can kind of update ourselves as these wee innovations and optimizations happen. But that's something that we've kind of started on with through the program that we kind of went through the iBioIC and the likes. But it's only really a start, and it really isn't feasible for us to kind of pay a consultant every time we need to kind of update the LCA, because, as I said, these changes are happening so regularly that it would end up essentially just being a kind of full-time job for somebody. But I have waffled for long enough, so I will say thank you very much for listening. Please all give us a follow, become one of our followers on our social medias platforms, and I will pass back over to Lindsay.
Thank you very much, Fergus. That was a fantastic talk. I really enjoyed, you talking about the challenges you've been through. I'm also really interested in your products as well. So maybe I'll swing by and see you guys sometime and try some of your products.
Absolutely, yeah.
So thank you very much for that. And then last but not least, we've got Antonia Joncilla, who is a group sustainability specialist from Croda. So I'm going to pass over to you now, Antonia.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Give me 1 second to share the screen. Right. Can everyone, oh no, not yet. How about now? Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'll just go ahead and start my presentation. Oh, can I hide this? How can I hide this? Oh, and it's also wrong where, okay. Sorry, give me a second.
Antonia, there we go, we've got it.
Can you see it all right now?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, great. Yes, so I'll be speaking today about the LCA process from Croda's perspective. I work as a sustainability specialist for Croda. So just an overview. I'll describe a bit about Croda, what we do, and what our vision is with regard to the life cycle assessment. Then I'll share an overview of the LCA tool we built and the findings of the first pilot LCA study, and I'll share with you some of the learnings we took from this pilot study and what are the next steps for Croda with regards to the LCAs. So yes, a bit about us. We are sustainability is right at the heart of our long-term strategy. Croda was founded on the principle of using smart science to turn bio-based raw materials into innovative ingredients that help improve people's lives and provide solutions to some of the world's biggest challenges. And our commitment is to be climate, land, and people positive by 2030. And the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are the foundations of our approach. We're also the third major chemical company to have verified science-based targets. One of our 2030 sustainability targets is to complete full LCAs, so cradle to gate LCAs for our top 100 products. These LCAs will help us assess the environmental impacts of our products throughout their entire life cycle. will help us increase transparency through the value chain in line with more stringent reporting requirements, will help us demonstrate the benefit of our products compared to counterfactual scenarios, will also add value to the commercial dialogue, and ultimately will drive the move to a more circular economy and more environmentally friendly products. So we work with LCA experts Ricardo to develop a cradle to grave LCA tool that assesses upstream procurement activities, core production processes, and downstream product use and disposal. So much like Fergus was mentioning in the presentation before, it is a big challenge when you have lots of products, when you have lots of variability. You want to build that infrastructure that is there and you can use it and adapt it as you go along. So that's what we did. And the LCA tool we built, it conforms to the relevant ISO standards. It can be duplicated and applied consistently to multiple products across different applications. It reports on over 30 environmental indicators, so it goes beyond the carbon footprint and it looks at global warming potential, human toxicity, ecotoxicity, acidification, eutrophication, and so on. And it identified the hotspots in the life cycle of each product, pinpointing the key stages, the key input materials, or the waste treatment processes that need to be addressed to improve the sustainability of the process. So yeah, so a bit about our LCA tool. It operates based on data inventories. Each data inventory reflects a particular stage in the product life cycle and requires inputs of primary and secondary data associated with that particular life cycle stage. So you can see on the right hand side an example of data inventory for growing a cereal crop. As I mentioned, a lot of our raw materials are bio-based, so growing a cereal crop would be the first stage we need to model in the life cycle of many of our products. So we collect data on the energy and materials needed, as well as the emissions and waste produced to source cereal grains. And within the data inventories, we need to ensure mass balance. So basically the mass of input materials should equal the mass leaving the system as waste, plus the mass of products in table 1, as you can see on the screen, so the cereal grains. Furthermore, you can see in this example that when you produce cereal grains, there's also a straw co-product, and because straws have economic values, they're utilized in different applications. We allocated some of the emissions and environmental impacts of growing a cereal crop to this co-product, to straws, using a particular percentage split based on the economic value of the two products. And also every flow we modeled in the data inventory, it needs to have a location listed, because our LCA model, it contains freight and grid modules, which are used to calculate the transport impacts across the life cycle and to define the specific grid mix associated with electricity consumption in each region. And data inventories are then scaled to meet study requirements. So you can see the little graph on the right-hand side, the little sketch. More exactly, each LCA study has a functional unit, which helps us report results in a more consistent way. And in order to reach that functional unit, the LCA model's calculations are predicated on a series of unit operations, as you can see in the little sketch on the right. So through the user interface, we control which data inventory is read by which unit operation. So for example, let's say that we do an LCA for breakfast granola. Granola is made from cereal grains, like we described in the tables on the left-hand side. And so we'll have a data inventory like the one on the right-hand side, sorry. Then in the granola LCA, we choose the functional unit to be 1 kilogram of finished products, so 1 kilogram of granola. Then the unit operations will help us scale the cereal grain inventory to reflect the environmental footprint of however much cereal grains are necessary to produce that 1 kilogram of granola. So now a real example from us. So the product we chose for our pilot LCA is Coltide Radiance. This is an innovative biopolymer added to fabric conditioner formulations to protect garments and fabrics from damage and color loss and graying. And here you can see the system boundary for the Coltide Radiance LCA with the different data inventories reflecting the different life stages of the product. So upstream colored in amber, within our direct operations in green, and downstream in blue. So, and then the green, yellow, and red arrows, they indicate the inflows, so the material used, the outflows, or the waste produced, and the energy required in each life stage, and thus the data we had to collect for each data inventory. So you can see that to produce cold tide radiance, we start here. I'm hoping you can see. Can you see me pointing? 1 second. Oh, sorry. Is it working? Hopefully, yes. So to produce cold tide radiance, we start from a bio-based feedstock, which gets through several processing stages upstream of our factory gate. And this produces the raw material that we need. This raw material is then incorporated in several production stages within our direct operations to produce, basically to manufacture cold tide radiance. And then downstream from our factory gates, cold tide radiance is then incorporated into the parent product, which is the fabric conditioner, which eventually is used in every household to wash clothes. And the functional unit we chose for this LCA is 1 kilogram of washed clothes. This enables us to demonstrate the net benefits of our product more clearly, because as I was saying earlier, our product helps protect garments and fabrics from all sorts of damage that occur during washing. So for 1 kilogram of washed clothes, we will have X grams of fabric conditioner being used. This contains Y milligrams of cold tide radiance, Z milligrams of raw material, and so on. So, when I was talking about those unit operations, that's what I was saying. We need to scale the data inventories to the measurement that we need. We set in our LCA. So these are the outputs of the cold tide radiance pilot study. So previously, I mentioned that the tool reports on over 30 environmental indicators, and now you can see some of these on the left-hand side of the graph. So the colors on the graph, they represent stages of the cold tide radiance life cycle, which are grouped into 3 big categories: upstream, core production, and downstream, as you can see here. So if we take any environmental impact category like climate change, highlighted here, you can see that the downstream part, so the manufacturing of the parent product, the fabric conditioner, and its use in laundry washing, makes the biggest contribution to climate change. You can see the purple here. And this is true for most of the environmental impact categories. So now on the right-hand side, we can further zoom into the climate change category, or we can do this for any and all of the other categories, and analyze it in more depth. So you can see that here you can see the biggest contributors to climate change at each stage of the product life cycle. So the downstream life stages we've established have the biggest climate change impact. And so these are steps 6 and 7 downstream. And here you can see this is mostly caused by the energy used in the manufacture of fabric conditioner and in the washing of clothes, as shown by the yellow bars. And then this is followed by the detergent and the water used during a wash cycle. So the materials, as shown by the blue bars. And yeah, so on top of that, overall, the LCA results indicate that cold tide radiance, our product, amounts to only 1.29% of the environmental impact of the fabric conditioner, so the parent product. So by comparison to the parent product, our product has a insignificant environmental impact. But even so, we can still zoom in into the life cycle stages that we have control over. So if we take a cradle to gate approach, we can assess the raw materials we use, and we can look at the manufacturing of cold tide radiance to identify ways to make these steps more sustainable and thus make a difference. So as we update the LCA tool with the new manufacturing improvements, the cradle to gate perspective will allow us to quantify the environmental benefits of a more energy efficient manufacturing process, as well as using more sustainable raw materials. And as I said, our tool also enables us to compare our product with counterfactual scenarios, alternate scenarios. So when washing clothes with a fabric conditioner that does not contain cold tide radiance, this results in 10% more carbon emissions and 8% more water use, which is associated basically with throwing away more clothes because they're more damaged. So through this LCA, we were able to identify these net benefits that come associated with our product, and they overcome the environmental burden of producing cold tide radiance. So for Croda, the most crucial part of the LCA process is the so what? Through these LCAs, we obtained a wealth of information on the environmental footprint of our products. What are we going to do with it? How do we make the best use of these results? So in this endeavor, we're developing internal training on the life cycle hotspots for the products where we do LCAs on, and training on the messaging we relate to our customers. We'll begin piloting customer discussions on the LCA data and how we can collaborate on joint projects to deliver more sustainable products. And parallel to this, we'll disseminating the LCA results externally and more broadly, using a full mix of webinars, conferences, marketing materials. And today is a prime example of that. And we want to do that to encourage further engagement and best practice within our industry to support a transition to a circular economy through actually putting into practice the results of these LCAs. And for us in 2022, we will finalize LCAs for 6 new products. And the most important thing is, right now we're developing an internal network of LCA specialists and LCA champions. So these people that will be applying the LCA tool, will be analyzing the results, and will be putting these results to good use. And in the long term, we want to use the LCA tool to integrate this into product development and use it as a decision-making tool to guide our raw material selection and our supplier partnerships. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to your questions. And back to you, Lindsay, once I'll figure out how to stop sharing.
Thanks very much, Antonia. That was a fantastic presentation. It was really insightful to understand how a large company with many products goes through the LCA process. And thanks as well for taking us through the coal tide radiance example. I thought that was really, really interesting and really insightful. So that concludes all of our presentations for today. And I'd like to move on to the question and answer session. So I see we've got a few questions in the Q&A box. So let's get to those and we'll get them answered. So I'll maybe just start at the bottom. So we've got a question from Nick. So he's saying that's fascinating presentations. As LCA is increasingly used in the marketing of goods and services, can you foresee the need for some kind of arbiter, national or international? One LCA says a byproduct is superior to its fossil product equivalent, then another says it's the opposite. How can this be addressed in an open and accessible way? I don't know what one of our presenters wants to tackle that question. Any takers? Antonia?
Thank you, Lindsay. Yes, well, basically with these LCAs, there comes the option to get them externally verified. So, when a company decides to build an LCA, first of all, you have to make sure it adheres to the ISO standards. You want to make sure you're very clear about the assumptions that you're making. And then once you produce the results, you can have these peer reviewed, you can have these externally verified. Therefore, you will avoid situations where you end up with two different LCAs from two competitors that say opposite things. So yeah, even right now in the early days, there is the option to avoid that through external verification.
Thanks very much, Antonia. I see there's another. Oh, Lucy, you've got your hand up. Sorry, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would maybe add to that, and I would say that the LCA itself isn't always used for marketing. So quite often the actual claims that are made at marketing are quite far removed, in particular because the consumer doesn't really know what to do with some of the LCA information. So I think it's like that always in marketing. The sort of actual facts and what gets said in marketing are quite different. So just sort of a side note.
I agree with that as well. Thanks very much, Lucy. Antonia, I see there's another question for you here. It says, how does your tool handle uncertainties in LCA while concluding the outcomes?
Well, yeah, our tool comes in with a built-in quality assessment criteria, basically. So within the tool, we use primary data where we know a lot more about how good the data is, and we have all these internal checks, but we're also using external data as well. So secondary data, so as it was mentioned before, EcoInvent, all sorts of other databases, data from our suppliers, data from from similar LCA studies, which apply to own example case by case. So that's where everything is brought together and we look at it as a whole. How does our data set look like? We have a consistent scoring criteria. And then based on the results of that quality assessment, we go back and we review where better data is required.
Thanks, Antonia. And Rita, I hope that answered your question. I see we've got a few questions from Martin. I'll work from the bottom up. So whilst performing an LCA for downstream processing and ultimate final formulation product, use is holistic. Is it relevant in order to sell a product to a formulator? If selling an ingredient shouldn't LCA finish at sale to customer, you have little influence on the downstream process. I don't know who wants to jump in for that one.
I'm happy to answer that, Lindsay. Yes, we get that question sometimes, like why bother to do cradle to grave when you can just do cradle to gate? But I think if you want to demonstrate the benefits of your product, if you really invest in product innovation and you want to make a positive change in the world and you claim to do so, then you need to have that holistic view. You need to know what's happening downstream as well from you, and that gives you a more solid base to engage with your customers then, rather than just having more of a tunnel vision and looking just within your factory gates. So there's benefits for both approaches, but if you want to identify net benefits of your products, then you have to go and look downstream as well.
Thanks very much, Antonia. And I've got a question for you here, Fergus, and this is from Steve, and he was wondering, is your extraction process solvent-based? If so, how do you ensure complete removal of solvent from the products?
I'm not sure how much I really want to speak about the process on the call at the moment. It is patent pending at the moment. I'm not the technical guy, so I wouldn't want to embarrass myself trying to explain how it would work, even if I could. So Steve, I'm happy to have a chat with you separately. I think we've spoken before, so I can give you an email afterwards and we can catch up.
Thanks, Fergus. No, I totally appreciate that you maybe don't want to talk about that live. So Steve, Fergus knew if you're not connected, I can connect you after today's webinar. So moving on to some of our other questions, I've got another one from Martin here, and he was wondering what the financial impact of performing an LCA is, and how much would an accurate LCA cost, and how long would it take to perform an LCA for a single bio-based product? I don't know if that's maybe one for Lucy.
I was afraid you'd say that. So it really, really depends on who's asking the question. And there was a question earlier that I answered in the text about whether we comply with standards, for example, product environmental footprint. And so I would say we do lots of high-level pieces of work where we're giving someone a snapshot of their process, and this only costs a couple of £1,000. And for those, we don't, not a couple, like 4 or 5, under 10. And for those, we don't completely comply with the standards, because in particular, third-party validation is really critical for complying with most standards. And that's just not affordable if you're getting £4,000 for something. So yeah, it sort of really depends who's asking and what they want it for. If they really want it to be able to write on the side of their packet, or if it's for internal development only. Yes, I'd say the simple stuff starts from a few £1,000s and it can get a lot more expensive. But I think it's worth doing the simple stuff early on so that you know where the impacts are going to be and you don't get any nasty shocks at the end of product development.
That's great. Thanks very much, Lucy. And moving further up. So I've got a question here. So referring to fossil-based versus biogenic carbon, is it not environmentally friendly to encourage carbon recycling irrespective of the source? How does LCA account for the differences in both carbon sources, given the complexity of carbon cycles? don't know if anyone wants to jump in for that one.
I think that one was directed at me because I mentioned that they use this fossil carbon dioxide. And yeah, absolutely, we should be encouraging carbon recycling, no matter where the carbon's coming from. There are a lot of questions around this, and my colleague David actually helped the Department for Transport develop a greenhouse gas methodology for these recycled carbon fuels, or RFIMBOs. But I think probably one of the big questions and misunderstandings in the recycled carbon field, so this is taken off a non-biological process, is who claims the saved emissions and to what extent are they really saved. So in that case study I showed, the carbon dioxide was captured from geothermal energy in Iceland. So if there is a carbon dioxide saving, that should be attributed to the electricity that's produced. And if it's already being attributed to that, if you then go and use that carbon dioxide, you can't say that you've saved carbon dioxide again. In particular, if your process then respires the carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere through fermentation, and then when we eat the food product through our own human respiration, the carbon dioxide's not really being saved at all. It's definitely been recycled, and that's a good thing, but we can't claim it's being saved anywhere. And so the idea that people are claiming their product is carbon negative because they've captured CO2 somewhere, it really depends if it's really been captured, and making sure that not multiple people in the same supply chain have made that claim.
Thanks very much, Lucy. Sorry, I feel like you've been getting lots of questions recently. I see we've got a couple more new questions that have come in from an anonymous attendee. So can one or more of the panelists explain what the role product category rules will have on LCA development in the future? Don't know if anyone wants to pick that one up. Maybe if the anonymous attendee sends me their details, then we can maybe pick that one up after. But we've got a question as well for Fergus. So what products are you making from the coffee grounds, and which high value chemicals will you produce?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a couple of different things that we are producing. The first is what we're calling a kind of coffee oil. So coffee grounds have a very similar fatty acid profile to palm. So this coffee oil is essentially that kind of straight replacement for palm oil. The only difference is that it's a liquid at room temperature, where palm is a solid. We've then developed further kind of refinement processes, so we can then decolorize and deodorize that oil. The oil has a bit of a kind of coffee aroma to it, and I guess for, say, skincare products, they might not want that kind of coffee aroma in there, so we can take that away and, as I said, decolorize it, because the oil itself is a kind of darker brown. We can get it to a kind of straw color, and then we've then created further derivatives from that, so surfactants and emulsifiers, again for use in the kind of skincare industry, all derived from our coffee oil. I think that's something that I probably didn't get across and when I was speaking, is that obviously with it, how cheap palm oil is, it's really important that we kind of focus on the derivatives of palm oil rather than just trying to replace palm oil, the kind of raw palm oil. And when you look in the back of, say, a bottle of a moisturizer or something like that, it's unlikely that it's going to say palm oil, but there more than likely will be derivatives, whether that is an emulsifier, a surfactant, or some other kind of functional ingredient in there that is derived from palm. And there's a lot more kind of, they're a lot higher value derivatives, and it kind of allows us to compete more on price. And then the final piece is we've also developed a coffee dye from the grounds as well. That's much earlier stage, but as I said, we've already had interest in it from a couple of really cool companies like Patagonia and Finisterre. So yeah, those are the kind of the key ones.
That's great. Thanks very much, Fergus. Maybe got time for one more. And also earlier we were going to do a Mentimeter survey, but we're having slight technical issues, but I've been told that they've been resolved. So I might introduce the Mentimeter after our question and answer session. So maybe just one more. There's one from John here. So there's an ongoing argument in comparison of LCA data. Petroplastics versus bioplastics is a typical example. How do we ensure that system boundaries are comparable? Often petroplastics are slanted, particularly when looking at end of life. Don't know if anyone wants to take that one on. Lucy?
Yeah, it's a really critical point, and I don't have an easy answer. I think we try to ensure that we compare to as many things as possible. I'd probably also say that a bioplastic isn't a bioplastic. It depends if it's a bio-based plastic or a biodegradable plastic, or all of these things have impacts on end of life. And yeah, I mean, the sort of lies, damn lies, and statistics really applies to LCA as well. You see an awful lot of nonsense being thrown around and for marketing purposes. So yeah, it's an ongoing challenge.
Thanks, Lucy. So I think that's probably all from our Q&A session today. Anything that's not been answered, we will take a look at and get back to you after today's session. I think we're now going to move on to our Mentimeter, all going well, technically. So I hope everyone can see that. So if everyone goes to menti.com and if they use the code 76780873, I'll give you a little minute to log into that. Sorry, taken slightly off guard because our Mentimeter was meant to be earlier and it was in my slides having all this detail in, but then it wasn't working earlier. So hopefully it works for you all just now. So which sector or subsector would you classify yourself as being in? So for example, agri-tech. So I see a few people have already given their answers there. Thank you very much for that. Let's give it a little minute. Got a few different sectors there. Quite a few: industrial biotechnology. Oh, lots. Fantastic. So that's quite a broad range we have on the call today. Great. So we'll maybe move on to the next question now, Dana.
Give it 1 more minute. People still typing. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one.
Thanks very much. So do you, your organization, have all the data you require? So we've got a yes, no, and sorry, yes, maybe, and not sure option there. So we're not getting any yeses so far. Oh, got one yes. So it looks like, yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done on the data side of things for everyone.
Maybe the person who put yes in the chat box could say who it was. Would be interesting to know.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm moving on to the next one.
And if not, so I think that was for the majority, how easy will it be for you or your organization to access the data it requires? So very easy, not sure until I start looking, challenging, and really difficult. Oh. So a lot of people are still saying it's quite challenging. And a couple are saying it's really difficult. Okay, thanks very much for that input, everyone. It's really useful for us to understand.
Okay, last chance before I'm going to move on to the next one.
And how would you rate your level of experience with LCA? So no experience, limited, experienced, and expert. So looks like limited is coming out on top. It's more with no experience, but then there's some people who are experienced and a few experts on our call today. Again, that's really useful insights.
Moving on to the next one.
And then I think this is a free typing one. So what's your biggest challenge around LCA? Data, what to do. Finding data, ethics, methodological choices, where to start, unknowns. Yeah, so we're getting a lot of really good information here. So I say there's quite a lot around data and a lot of unknowns. That's what's coming out. It's really useful.
I think the not standardized method is a good one, I think.
Yep, and getting consistent data as well.
Yeah.
It's another good one. Maybe move on to the next question. Oh, sorry, we're moving again. Just when I think we're finished.
Okay, last chance. Moving on to the next one.
And again, it's another free typing one. So what would help you progress with LCA? And just to make everyone aware that this is really useful feedback and it will help inform future sessions and how we'll follow up on this session today. So thank you very much for taking the time to fill in the Mentimeter. So there's a lot of really good input here. Standardization, I think, is a really key one. I see that coming up a few times there. Greater access to data, absolutely. Coaching, I agree, would be really helpful. An affordable model, yeah. The registry of data sources is a really good suggestion. Workshops and courses and just general advice, yep. The digitalization of data, again, would be a really useful one. This is all really helpful feedback.
Okay, I'm moving on to the next one.
How important do you believe LCA is to your business? So the options are not very, marginal, very, and essential. Okay, so it's looking like no one said not very, so essential, very, and marginal. I think it's becoming increasingly more important, especially when going for funding, because a lot of funders now ask for some data on carbon accounting or LCA. So I think it is going to become increasingly more important as we move towards net zero.
And I believe that was the end of our Mentimeter session.
So thank you very much to everyone for participating. And that takes us to the end of today's session. I'd like to thank you all for joining today. After today, we'll send out the presentations. So the slides you heard today, we'll share them with you. And also we'll send out a recording of today's session in case you have any colleagues or anyone who was wanting to join but wasn't able to. And if you've got any questions at all, then please don't hesitate to get in contact with myself and Dana, and I've provided our email addresses at the bottom there. And just last but not least, thank you to all for joining and to our wonderful speakers today. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.